and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm going to kind of just dive right into it. I kind of want to cover foreign news, U.S. related, and it's something that I've talked about and I've covered quite extensively. And it gets into the U.S. supposedly funding good rebels in Syria against ISIS, but the rebels are also wanting to fight Assad, but they're the good rebels, but ISIS ends up with all the goods. Meaning, you know, it's kind of a deception going on, propaganda. And I and others have mentioned we are basically funding and supplying ISIS, and I believe with the goal to go after Assad. And we've talked about this over and over, and he's been pushing Obama. The puppet masters are pulling for Assad to be removed, that whole government to be restructured, basically like Libya, Iraq, every other Middle Eastern country that we've helped liberate. The bigger picture, and we've gotten into this where, you look at the caliphate, more importantly, looking at the history of the Ottoman Empire and the Saudi Arabia's want to get to that and be the capital of the Ottoman Empire, be the rulers of the Ottoman Empire, and ISIS being the strong hand and going out there doing the dirty work, but eventually they will be weeded out too. But to make things more aggressive and violent over there, escalation in Syria, Obama to airstrike Assad. And I'm going to play this from the Ron Paul Liberty Report. And then I got another Liberty Report from Ron Paul that I'm going to play directly after this. And it has to do with the U.S. drone war accelerating and victims unknown. And this is something that we really need to understand, because if you want to understand why we do get people that hate us, look at the destruction we have in the wake of this. well, we had to go after. No, no, these people had nothing to do with the terrorist attacks. Um, if anything, the U.S. government is more involved in it by helping fund ISIS, which is just a offshoot, basically, of Al Qaeda, a grown-up version. Al Qaeda decided to grow up and become. You see a lot of the same leadership. Yes, there might be a little section that still call themselves Al Qaeda that don't want to associate with the even more extreme actions that you see coming out of ISIS. But a lot of them are the same, and I'm sure the funding circles that go around in that whole situation are probably the same. But let's go ahead and dive into the Liberty Reports. Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you today.
Good to see you, Dr. Paul.
Daniel, I'd like to revisit an issue that we talked about last week. It has to do with Syria and the plan with Turkey and the United States starting to making plans for bombing and having a no-fly zone. And we expressed our concerns and worries about it. But right now, it looks like our worries were justified, but it might even be worse than what we were considering because things seem to be moving right along. But just as a refresher on how this thing in Syria has evolved, it's now 4 years ago that Obama said, Assad must go, Assad must go. And so we've been pestering them for a long time, and there were a lot of people who wanted Assad to go. I mean, we know the factions who want to get rid of Assad, but Assad didn't leave. So a year later, it was 2 years later, there was a false flag announcement. Oh, he's killing his people with gas. It reminds us of Iraq. Well, and the Russians got involved, and Obama says, I got to start bombing, and Congress didn't want to do it. The American people didn't want to do it. And we were excited. We won. He's backing off. We didn't get this war started. But then what happened a year ago? The bombing started anyway, acting, outside of the Congress. There was no authority for it. They didn't have to worry about the money, just like they started the war in Iraq. They used the money that was for Afghanistan, and they just shifted around. So this is expanding. But update us now on what is happening now, and how chaotic it is in Syria and that whole no-fly zone that they're working on.
Well, you remember we talked last time, I think, about the fact that after all of this money that was appropriated, they've only been able to train 60 people to go in and to infiltrate into Syria and start fighting against, they say ISIS, but we're against ISIS and Assad, both. Well, last week they tried to infiltrate some of these 60 that they'd trained. As soon as they crossed the border into Syria, they were all captured by al-Nusra, which is an al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. And the funniest thing, Dr. Paul, is the New York Times article pointed out, Washington was shocked because they said, we thought they would be treated as allies by al-Qaeda. So what are we training allies for al-Qaeda for after 14 years after 9/11? So what happened is some of these were captured. Some of them called in U.S. airstrikes to try to be saved. And subsequent to this activity last week, Obama announced that he authorized the military to conduct airstrikes anywhere in Syria in support of these U.S.-backed rebels. And as the Wall Street Journal, which broke the story, pointed out, this also means that for the first time, there is an implicit authorization for the U.S. to attack Syrian government forces as well.
As you tell the story, you had to laugh a little bit, and it's so sad because it's so serious and so dangerous, yet it's hilarious on how this program works and how stupid it seems to be. But I have one that might even compete with your example of how silly this whole thing is. But you shouldn't worry too much because our government covered themselves. When they found their 60 people to train to take over ISIS in Syria, we had them sign a contract. And so anybody who joined to get our check, I guess, had agreed that they would only fight ISIS. but they would not fight Assad. So they would do this. Of course, I thought we were in there to get rid of Assad. So that's the silliness of it. But I'm sure the neocons have a pretty good answer for this. And, I remember clearly what was going on in the 60s, when Nixon escalated and we had 500,000 troops in there and it was escalating, kept getting worse. But the neocons, even about that example and this one, their answer is it was stupid. They'd agree with us sending 60 troops in like that, but they would put all the blame on pure military tactics by Obama, and what we need is a strong man, a strong force. Send in the troops and send in the bombs. And we know that several running for president right now are for sending huge amounts of troops into this area.
This is like we talked about last time. Max Boot, a big neocon who wrote in commentary, did criticize this new plan. He was criticizing the no-fly zone plan because it just simply wasn't enough. It's never enough for them, and then if things go badly, then it's his fault for not escalating. But yeah, as you point out, they've been at this for 4 years now. They've been trying to train different factions of people to go and fight Assad and now ISIS, because as in Iraq, there was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq before the U.S. got into it. There was no ISIS in Syria before the U.S. decided to overthrow Assad. So create these problems and then try to solve the problems.
You almost have to have a scorecard to find who's on first, who's on which side. And sometimes we're on Iran's side on one occasion, but not on another occasion. But there are so many factions, I could see why people's eyes would glaze over. And that, of course, is why the attractiveness of a non-intervention policy makes a lot of sense. But, we have Assad, who represents Syria. He's under siege, and he's not getting a whole lot of support, although he's getting token support from Iran. And, of course, the Soviets, the Russians, sympathize with him. But then we have this faction, a NATO ally and a friend of the United States, and now we work with this extra thing, and Turkey was saying our borders are being invaded, so therefore they want to take it to NATO, and then we have an agreement, to expand the war and go into more bombing. But then you say, well, who are you going to bomb? Well, we're going to bomb ISIS and the Kurds. But it turns out so far it looks like most of the bombing's been hitting the Kurds, which would be what Turkey would want to do. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a difficult problems, for Syria, Iran, and Turkey, because the Kurds want their homeland. But it is so messy and so complex, and we have messed that place up so badly, I don't know why people shouldn't say that maybe we're making things worse over there. Any chance of that being the case?
As we did in Syria and Iraq and around Libya and Iraq and elsewhere. But you're right. The Kurds, they sort of gave the U.S. a gift. They said, you can use Incirlik base to start bombing Syria. And that sort of, the U.S. backed off, and that's when we thought they'd agreed to a no-fly zone of some sort. But then Turkey said, we're going to start helping more. But when they were helping, as you point out, they were killing what we consider the boots on the ground, which are the Kurds on the ground fighting ISIS.
So they're the ones we're training, and they're doing a pretty good job, and they're anti-ISIS, and yet what do we do? And that is not a clean argument either, because there are a couple groups, with the Kurds.
Yeah.
It's just not one monolithic group. That's why the complexity is such that it is not going to work out easily, and everything we do seems to make it complex.
And you'd never know it from media coverage, but this really is a lot like the Iraq War. This was all based on a false pretext from the beginning.
On the gas, you mean?
They have short memories, because if you remember, the bombing started, the latest round of U.S. bombing started when there was this small group of Yazidis on a mountaintop that we had to save. These poor people, they were being slaughtered. We went in there and we bombed them. A lot of them actually wanted to stay. They didn't want to be rescued. But then after that, the U.S. discovered the Khorasan group, which, if you remember, was portrayed in the U.S. media as way more frightening than Al-Qaeda. They were ready to attack, so we had to go into Syria because that's where they were. Well, it was a completely fictitious, made-up thing by the U.S. to allow them to go into Syria. So the same thing is happening. The media, once again, is not doing its job. It's not questioning these things, and we're stumbling into another big war.
Well, there was one journalist from that area explained that all these factions, in spite of them fighting among themselves, have one thing in common, and that is they don't want an outsider in. They don't want United States involved. So that's maybe explaining the reason we get 60 fighters who last for about an hour and why a larger force just throws down their weapons and gives them over to ISIS. And it also is a threat to us because it's when we get involved. It was our presence in the Middle East and the killing of civilians, which is still ongoing, that was one of the motivations for al-Qaeda to come here and teach us a lesson. And they're still, in the last year, I think, I'm not sure how they can separate, supporters and the militants versus the civilians, but they even admit that innocent civilians, over 400 have been killed. This past week, I think there, in this episode here, there were 40 more killed. And, every individual killed has an extended family. And I think it all builds for anti-U.S. sentiment, and we have to deal with that. So overall, since more troops, I don't think could solve it. And even if it did, it'd be wrong. But I think this method that we're doing here is doing nothing more than draining us and building up the fears in this country, that the greatest fear right now is the war against the American people, because ISIS is everywhere. They are coming, and it's terrorism. So therefore, the American people are supposed to give up their liberties. This is war. And it's not like World War II. World War II, we knew it was going to end, and it did. And even in some ways, Korea and Vietnam ended. But we have been told incessantly, this one doesn't end. So if the war over there doesn't end against terrorism, and they're every place, the war against American liberties are going to continue. The big question, though, that I haven't answered in my own mind, because I try to give people a pass and saying they're just stupid, and there's unintended consequences. But others who are more conspiratorial say, no, they're deliberately wanting to do this because this serves their international interests. But I don't think we can settle that argument right now. So, but what about Congress? Do you think Congress should be exerting a little bit of more authority here? I complained, along with your help, when I was in Congress. Why aren't we doing more? Why don't we stand up and do something? But I think you used the word, they were AWOL.
Yeah, it's true. This authorization for U.S. airstrikes to back the troops that it infiltrates, that's Syria-wide. That, in a sense, is an authorization for the use of force. And as you say, it was made by the president alone. Congress has not even mentioned it, probably hasn't even recognized what's happened.
Yeah, and 2 years ago, they looked like we were going to have a vote. And when Obama knew he didn't have the votes, he backed off. And here we end up doing it anyway.
Just ignore him.
Yeah, but even the thought of a declaration of war, because this is war. When you start bombing and deciding, well, Assad has to go, good or bad, it has nothing to do with Assad going to attack America. So to me, it's tragic. And I think this is one of the things that has been a total failure of our Constitution, and have totally ignored the intent of the founders to try to rein in the executive branch, rein in the king, because they did not want the executive branch to be able to go to war without the Congress having an explicit authorization, explicit vote to go to war, which was to reflect the people. Now it is so callous, and I've written this in my recent book, that this is one of the most serious things that we have, because everybody ignores it, and they go around it, and even the finances. And I point out also in the book that if they need to, they can extend credit through the Federal Reserve and give it to these factions and bail out banks. It's so out of control. And yet, too often I find the American people are rather complacent, but they're not hearing it. They're not hearing it enough from the members of Congress, and they're not certainly hearing it from the media. I mean, they're not giving it a straight scoop. And if they did, I would hope they would come to their senses, because a couple of years ago it seemed like we got information out, and the people rejected it. And that is my contention, that most people have a natural instinct not to go and look for violence and war, because it ends so badly. But they have to be driven, by war propaganda. Yes. So I think this is just another example of runaway interventionism overseas, runaway spending. It's out of control. It doesn't serve our interests. The sooner we get out of here, the better. Over the periods that I was campaigning for the presidency, I said, we just marched into these areas. We should just march out, and we'd all be better off. America would be safer and richer. We could set an example, and maybe they would pay attention to us. But we do not have the moral authority, we do not have the wisdom, and we do not have the constitutional authority to believe that we are so smart and we are so exceptional that we can impose our will on the people of the Middle East. The sooner we realize that, the better. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today.
Okay, and what was pointed out there towards the end was the apparent covert way that Obama was able to basically allow for warfare with Assad in Syria. And it's something that's it's understood that, well, it's to support the rebels, and anybody that tries to stop the rebels that are fighting ISIS, including Assad, we can go after. Basically, they can make up an excuse saying, oh, Assad attacked the rebels, therefore that's who we're going after. He covertly, through this, allowed for warfare with Assad, and again without Congress. And a lot of people are like, I don't even get into that anymore. Well, we have to understand there are going to be threats to you as a American in America, not only from our government, but from outside entities, because of things our government does in our name. I shouldn't even say our government. The so-called government does in the name of everybody that lives in this arbitrary border. So you're lumped in with what the government's doing over in the Middle East. So you're going to see radical groups that we're helping train and fund be able to basically attack us here at home. And a lot of these people already have a hatred for America because of all of the involvement. We've been involved over there for so long that it's really just, for them, it's too much not to be involved. They feel like their livelihoods are completely under attack, therefore they're going to raise up. Now, that doesn't mean that justifies them hurting innocent people here at home. It doesn't justify any of that. It's an understanding of it, but it's not a justification for it. Smarter and bigger people know what to do in situations, and defending yourself is one thing, but attacking innocent people because of your ignorance to the fact that these people more than likely are not for what's going on. But I have one more I wanted to play. Ron Paul Livery Report, U.S. drone war accelerates, victims unknown. And this is according to a study. U.S. launched more drone attacks in July than the period from January to June. Since 2009, drones have killed more than 5,000. The continued use of signature strikes means the U.S. has no idea who is actually being killed.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is co-host Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you today.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
I'd like to talk about the drone warfare that's been going on for 10 years or so. And not too much conversation, but recently there was a major achievement claim that they had killed an al-Qaeda leader of Saudi Arabia or the Arabian Peninsula. But it turns out that it wasn't so much of a great victory, that it was almost accidental, and yet they were sort of implying this was a great victory. But in June, this happened. This leader was killed. But Truth Out put a good article out on this very issue, and it says, thanks to reliance on, quote, signature drone strikes, U.S. military doesn't know who it's killing. Well, I thought these drones were supposed to target people that they knew, and they had people helping on the ground. This was going to limit the warfare and make sure the war could be accomplished without endangering us. But what is going on here with this signature drone? It certainly isn't signature in the sense that they know who they're targeting, but the record is pretty lousy. The statistics are bad, and it looks like it may even well be accelerating.
Well, according to another report, the drone strikes in Afghanistan from just in July were equal to all of the strikes from January all the way up through June. So they are accelerating. They continue to accelerate. But you're right, this use of signature strikes, I think most people don't understand that when these drones don't target known individuals, they target certain behaviors rather than suspects. And so if there's a house where they see people gathering that fit the signature, and it includes gatherings of men from their teens to their middle age, if they're traveling together, or if they're carrying guns, which is very, very common in parts of Pakistan, these are considered legitimate targets. And they don't even know until the end whether they were right or not.
Right. Anybody that's of age, where they could be, they are to be a target, and they are criminal. And they deserve to be killed, according to our policy. But the conclusion to this is, unless posthumously intelligence proves them innocent. So, yeah, they're going to grant that they made a mistake and they were innocent after they kill them. Yeah. That makes a heck of a lot of sense.
And they wonder why we're so unpopular.
Yes.
But this June strike, where they didn't know who it was they were killing, this follows a couple of other high-profile ones that, in a way, fortunately, although unfortunately, the strike in April that killed the two hostages. There was such an uproar over this, especially because one of them was an American aid worker and was an Italian aid worker. There was such an uproar, but that the Obama administration felt it had to explain a little bit more than it had, because these are done in absolute secrecy. And so they pointed out that they had no idea who was in this compound. They had just identified it as an al-Qaeda compound, and that's why they hid it, and that's why they attacked it. So there's no... they don't know if there are civilians in the vicinity or what. It's targeted, and that's what happened. And this also happened back in January when another American, this Adam Gadon, was killed. It was also by accident. They had no idea who was in the compound. They identify a place as a compound. It could be maybe the women are bringing lunch or the kids are playing outside or what have you, but it's a compound, it's a target, and it gets hit.
Well, I think this is very, very dangerous, because it's justified by saying it's limiting warfare. They don't drop bombs and they won't kill innocent people, and we can target individuals. Now, one of the early ones, or a few years ago, al-Awlaki, an American citizen, was targeted on purpose. But then the cousin or the nephew was also killed. He probably was intended, but he was collateral damage. And that is, they just put up with this, and they say that's part of the process.
Yeah. Well, the Guardian newspaper has done a lot of good reporting, and they pointed out that, men loading fertilizer into a truck may be making a bomb, but they also may just be farmers. And so when you have this lack of precision, for another example, they track SIM cards, the things in your phone that give you location. And so you may be a terrorist with your phone. You may have left it in a restaurant. You may have loaned it to your kid or what have you. But so tracking this technical data rather than the person also results in a lot of people being killed. And we've seen that now, I think, over 5,000 have been killed in Obama's term of office.
It's sort of fighting pseudo-war. It's vicious and people die, but it isn't like there's an enemy. They've declared war against us. We declare war against them. We know who the target is. We fight and we get over it. And yet we're so engaged in being the policemen of the world. Americans don't want it, and the people around the world don't want us to assume that we should invade. So, and the American people have been disgusted with it, so they're holding back. Even when the bombing of Syria was considered, the American people said no. But this is contained. It's restricted. It looks like you can do this, and it will achieve what we want. And it reminds me a little bit about how sanctions go, short of war. And I think sanctions are very serious because when you deny people raw products and medicines and things, that to me is enough for a person to feel like they're being a war has been declared against them. But this. People in Congress who generally would like to see themselves as anti-war will go along with sanctions, and they'll say, oh, yeah, this will be limited. Well, the one thing it guarantees is they won't win anything, but we're going to lose a lot. We lose a lot of money. We lose lives. We create more hatred. And matter of fact, if you look at the statistics about suicide among our veterans, people who run these drone missiles sites are susceptible to it, too, because there must be an effect on them. I mean, they're not even in the battlefields, and they didn't have to worry about stepping on mines, but they still come back with their minds all shaken up and end up committing suicide. So this cannot replace it, but the neocons may well agree with this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they agree with that, and that's why we don't like to mess around. We want to send in the troops.
Yeah.
I mean, a guy like Lindsey Graham, will be yelling and shouting about sending the troops, and he's already taken that position. But when the trouble comes, I'm afraid that the propagandists will finally find some incident that will be emotional enough to get the American people to go along with this, and they totally forget about the process. That's what's disgusting about how we flaunt the restrictions placed in the law, which is the Constitution, that we should go easy. But the concept of us being the policemen of the world and that we can fight these little skirmishes, and then they say, well, this will accomplish it, but it really makes us less safe.
Yeah, the media loves to propagandize Americans. They love to give a good news story. We killed an Al-Qaeda leader. But why does it seem like another one always pops up? It's like they're dealing with the symptoms and not the cause of the problem.
Right, and it's propaganda, and unfortunately, I think it's the source of a lot of problems. But back to my old argument, which I use frequently, is what would the American people think if in their neighborhood they had just heard that a drone missile fell on an individual but killed 10 innocent people, and it came from a foreign government that had a foothold in our country, and they were launching them from our own country. It's a foreign government. You think all Americans, Republicans and Democrats and independents would come together and say, get rid of the foreigners? And I think that's all that this does. And yet we never seem to change. We get somebody in like Obama, who's supposed to be more for peace, and here he is in a major war. Matter of fact, that drone was in Yemen. Mm-hmm. He's all for that war. Now he wants to expand the war in Syria, and these drones are hitting Pakistan still, and Afghanistan and Somalia. But the principle is still there, and that is going to continue. And unfortunately, I think we're going to be more vulnerable.
Yeah, I think we mentioned this in an earlier show, but there was this study a couple of years ago by Stanford and NYU Law School about the effects of drones on the population in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it found that, not really surprising, but it found that the physical harm that it does aside, the effect that it has on the population is to terrify them. They wander around in a constant state of terror, of fear, as we would if, we're here in South Texas. Just think if every month or every couple of weeks someone got hit in our vicinity.
Out of the sky.
Yeah. And even if there were some bad guys that we were happy they got killed, we would still be up in arms and terrified about this. The other thing that the human rights group Reprieve did a study, and they found that 28 unknown people were killed for every targeted person by drones. So 28 people have no idea who they are for everyone we mean to kill.
Well, of course, afterwards, our government may check and find out that they weren't, terrorists and they weren't combatants. But what good does that do? The damage has already been done. And you say, well, it's one individual. No, it's maybe for one person, there's going to be dozens and dozens, friends and neighbors and relatives, and all these individuals are going to be, motivated to try to stop us, and they turn their anger toward us.
And have we had any achievement? What have we achieved since President Bush started it? Obama accelerated it in all these years. Are any of these countries any more stable than they were when we started? Are we any safer, or are they any more pro-American than before?
I don't think that anything's been achieved, and a lot of harm was done. But some conspiracy people say, well, that's deliberate. They can't be that stupid. It can't have that many unintended consequences. But that remains to be seen, because we know what the facts are. The facts are that we're engaged here and we're doing these things, and they don't like it, and it doesn't seem to go away. It seems to be expanding, and it boils down to our foreign policy. I think that unless we address our overall foreign policy, these problems are going to continue. How silly this can be doesn't get out on the news. It's not going to be on the TV and riling up the people and say, hey, quit this. We don't need these drones. We don't need to be constantly in these countries around the world. But it has to be a fundamental philosophic change, not change into something brand new that we never heard of. It has to be a revisit to the principles that the founders talked about. And they're simple, and they're based on morality, and that is friendship with other nations and trade with other nations, and stay out of entangling alliances. That is what we need to do. We need to stay out of these alliances, and yet every single day, not only do we see the consequence of being in these entangling alliances, it seems like we're getting into more and more. That will not be the road to peace and prosperity, and hopefully we can wake up this new generation of Americans to say, enough is enough. It's time that we take care of our country and provide a strong national defense. For peace and prosperity, that is a necessity. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Liberty Report. And
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Ron Paul Liberty Report. Now, I have an article here out of Truth and Media, and it's originally out of antiwar.com. Al-Qaeda whittles down U.S. trained rebels in Syria. And you heard him mention this in the one Liberty Report. Group urges rebels to abandon training in cooperation with U.S. Late last month, the first U.S. trained rebels from a group called Division 30, also called the New Syrian Forces by U.S. officials, arrived in northern Syria. The faction is the result of hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. spending to create a new force, but amounted to only 54 people. It's getting progressively smaller. Almost immediately after arriving, the rebels ran about a Syrian al-Qaeda faction, Jabhat al-Nusra, who captured between 8 and 18 of them. Not long thereafter, more fighting left one of the NSF dead, and today al-Qaeda is confirmed to have captured another 5 fighters. Losing a few fighters here and there would normally be seen as acceptable losses, but with only 54 rebels to start with, there could be as few as 30 of the NSF fighters even left in the field, depending on just how many have actually been taken by Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda issued a statement on Friday confirming the first round of detentions, warning that rebels should abandon any training and cooperation with the U.S. Despite confirmation of captures from multiple sources. The Pentagon so far denies anyone was captured. Some of these new rebels probably even just went AWOL. They probably screw this. I'm going home. Okay. Okay. It says here also there was another one out of anti-war U.S. trained Syrian rebels routed by Al Qaeda flee into Kurdish territory, which are going to be more aligned with the Syrians. I can't find this other article I was looking for. Okay, I think I'm just going to move on then. Going to get into some of the upcoming 2016 election debates and all that. I have one here, and this is out of Truth and Media. Marijuana Policy Project. Whole Foods donate to Rand Paul's 2016 presidential bid. Mid-year Federal Election Commission filings are in, and Rand Paul's 2016 presidential campaign has reportedly received a boost from atypical Republican primary donors like Marijuana Policy Project and Whole Foods. National Journal notes that Marijuana Policy Project PAC donated $5,000 to Rand Paul for America, another $5,000 to Paul's Senate re-election campaign, and $4,500 to Rand Paul Victory Fund, a PAC which supports Paul's Senate re-election bid. MPP recently rated Rand Paul's positions on cannabis freedom issue with an A- grade, placing him ahead of all announced presidential candidates in both parties. Quote, Rand Paul has actually put his money where his mouth is, said Marijuana Policy Project Federal Policies Director Dan Rifle. He's been very firm in his belief that states ought to set their own marijuana policy. Rifle said that he is not surprised that his organization chose to max out donations for Paul after MPP executives attended Paul's political fundraiser for marijuana-related business leaders last June at the National Cannabis Industry Association's Cannabis Business Summit in Denver, Colorado. Paul sponsored a bill last month that would allow cannabis businesses to access legal banking services. He also joined with Democratic Senator Cory Booker to promote reform to federal drug sentencing guidelines and in sponsoring the Compassionate Access Research Expansion and Respect States Act, which would end the federal government's prohibition on medical marijuana and scientific cannabis research. Mother Jones's Russ Coma analyzed the FEC filings of America's Liberty PAC, a super PAC supporting Paul's campaign, and found more unusual filings for a Republican primary bid. George Macricostas, the CEO of data storage company Raging Wire donated $1.1 million to Super PAC. Jeff Yass, CEO of Philadelphia private investment firm Susquehanna International, donated $1 million. Both represent relatively untapped sources of money for a conservative candidate. Yass has previously written large checks, but none larger than $50,000 donation he made in 2004 to Club for Growth, while Macrocostas appears to have donated a total of just $12,000 prior to his $1.1 million donation to America's Liberty, he wrote. Coma added the Super PAC roped in other big donations, including $50,000 from John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, and $50,000 from Patrick Byrne, the CEO of Overstock.com. The group has also received $15,000 from ICC Holdings, an Illinois company hoping to be one of the first companies to legally operate a commercial cannabis farm. Paul has called for a more inclusive Republican Party and said earlier this year, if we want our message to resonate across the land, if we want our message to be inclusive, I tell people, look at the Republican Party. The Republican Party needs to look like America. White, black, brown, rich, poor, with tattoos, without tattoos, with earrings, without earrings. We need to take our message where it's not been taken before. Last September, Ben Swan released a Truth to Media episode exposing the federal government's mixed messages on medical marijuana. And I'm going to play that. I played it when he first put this out. It's been a while. But I do want to play this again. This was Truth to Media. Fed says cannabis is not medicine while holding the patent.
For those who believe in marijuana and cannabis freedom, the future has never been brighter. Right now, there's an awakening to the benefits of cannabis for medicinal purposes, specifically something called CBD oil. But is the new CBD craze being manipulated by media and politicians? If it weren't, we wouldn't need to do a show about it. The first step toward truth is to be informed. The CBD oil. You've probably heard of it by now, thanks to CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta.
People are lighting up all over the country.
Millions are now aware of the cannabinoid-rich oil being used to help children in Colorado with epilepsy, especially this one little girl, Charlotte Figge, after whom the Charlotte's Web strain of cannabis has been named.
It's okay, baby.
This is their daughter, Charlotte, having a seizure.
I wanted to learn what CBD oil and the push behind it is all about, so I traveled to Denver, Colorado, home to legalized marijuana and the Stanley brothers, the family behind the Charlotte's Web strain of cannabis oil. They were the ones to prove in Charlotte Figge's case that CBD-rich cannabis oil can prevent seizures in children.
We had this strain that we were actually going to use for cancer patients because studies have shown that CBD helps stops the metastasizing of cancer. So we went ahead and tried it because we knew it was very low in THC, and after she had it a week later, she went a week seizure-free.
Yeah, kitty.
The child who had had 300 seizures a week was now down to just 1 every 7 days.
Charlotte Figge's life was transformed by CBD oil. Now, to understand what is unique about CBD oil, you have to understand what a cannabinoid is. Now, in marijuana, there are multiple cannabinoids, including THC, CBD, CBN, CBA, and over 160 other compounds in the plant, including terpenes from the plant that create the most effective medicine. Now, to be clear, in order to get a high from cannabis, you need to have a high level of just one cannabinoid, THC. Again, that's just one particular cannabinoid. Now, in the Stanley's case, they began growing cannabis with lower levels of that cannabinoid THC and higher levels of CBD.
CBD is known to be a neuroprotectant. It's also one of the few things that causes neurogenesis. So it's not just seizures that this helps in epileptics. It's autoimmune disorders, whether that's cancer, Crohn's, lupus. There's so many different types of things. It's a huge anti-inflammatory, so all kinds of people would love to have this.
Today, in these stunningly short time since Charlotte Figge's story became famous, the Stanleys have thousands of patients on a waiting list for their CBD oil.
As you can see, it drips down. We're able to recapture the alcohol so we can reuse it. When it's done, we're left with an oil that is more like a molasses.
In fact, there are thousands of families who have already uprooted their lives and moved to Colorado for the CBD oil. Thousands more are on the way. They're called cannabis refugees.
I test it again, and then I can give it to the patients.
Well, all of that has led to other states wanting to legalize CBD oil. In fact, the governor of Utah, of all places, just signed a CBD bill into law legalizing possession of the oil. In addition, a bill in Alabama has now passed the legislature. It is awaiting the governor's signature to be signed into law in that state. In fact, lawmakers in Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, Wisconsin, and many other states either have or will now consider CBD bills just this year.
Well, we're, at 20 states right now, so you already have 20 laws on the books that the people wanted or the people's representatives wanted.
Well, Mark Slaw has a company in Denver called I Comply, which is fighting to keep small growers compliant with state regulation on marijuana. There are 8 strict guidelines that must be followed. Mark says states are jumping on board with CBD, but not with marijuana.
So I think what politicians certainly don't realize when they're trying to play to where the puck was and not where the puck is going to be is that regulating just one compound greatly underserves most of the patients who really need this medicine. So even along the lines of medical efficacy, it simply isn't reasonable.
The reality that Mark addresses is how media and politicians are jumping on the CBD train because it doesn't get you high, but they're ignoring some very important medical facts about cannabinoids. I talked via Skype with Shauna Banda about this very issue.
Start out by telling me about when you were sick, the level to which you were sick, and what that looked like in your life.
Oh, I was, of course, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2002. And in that first year, I had my first bowel resection. Body was recognizing that something was wrong, and my immune system went into overdrive and essentially attacked itself. Your life starts to go downhill. You're in pain constantly, so you can't even think straight. It's hard to go through your day-to-day life when you're constantly thinking about the pain and how to get rid of it.
Shona's condition was so bad that her teeth literally became soft and the roof of her mouth had turned black. She couldn't stand and says she parented her children from the couch. Described like having a stomach flu every day for years, despite all the medications and the doctors. Shauna was rotting from the inside out. Shauna's breakthrough came when she saw a YouTube documentary, Run from the Cure by Rick Simpson, which explained how to extract CBD and THC oil from marijuana.
In 2001, my family doctor informed me that there was nothing more they could do. They had nothing left to try on me, so I was on my own.
Shauna had started smoking marijuana just to be able to function, but she wasn't getting better. Shauna's husband at the time, he wanted to get her a vaporizer, but that vaporizer became the road to so much more.
He went and got me a very old-fashioned glass dome vaporizer from the 70s, and I was reading a book, and I pinched off that hose way too long, and oil started forming on the dome. And he went out and got me a spatula, and I started to scrape it out 3 times a day. And I put whatever I could get into a gel cap. And within 3 days, I didn't need the use of my cane anymore to walk. And I started healing quite rapidly. So rapidly that I started to write a journal.
That journal would become a book, Live Free or Die. Shauna's mantra for her own life and the lives of the people she continues to educate across the country on the benefits of cannabis oil today. But politicians and media are making CBD oil out to be the kind of good kind of cannabis, while arguing that THC is the bad kind of cannabis. Now listen, while that's not how any of this works, that is the case that is subtly being made. As that happens, 2 forces will likely come into play. Keep an eye on. Number 1, in order to push the market away from the small sellers and the harvesters of CBD oil, states, along with the feds, will likely create a regulatory climate that is so difficult to manage that they will, through cronyism, force CBD oil into the hands of a few, which in turn limits supply and then forces the price of the oil to rise considerably. Number 2, big pharmaceutical companies will likely begin putting out a safe and legitimate form of CBD oil. And that is already starting to happen.
GW Pharmaceuticals out of Great Britain has been producing Sativex, which is a 50-50 blend of CBD and THC. They have no real research behind whether or not 50-50 is even the right ratio, and they certainly don't include the other terpenes or other chemical compounds from the cannabis plant. So we could see the bone get tossed to the pharmaceutical dog. It's certainly a possibility, but I think if more people take a stand for really descheduling marijuana, regulating it in a manner similar to alcohol to allow adults who are already out there, supply and demand economics, wanting this plant and providing a safe way to be able to provide it is really the best model to move forward with.
So what you need to know is where the U.S. government actually stands on this issue. Cannabis, marijuana. Today, it is still a Schedule I drug. That means, according to our government, it has no medicinal use whatsoever and has a high potential for abuse. Now, does our government really believe that? No. In 1999, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, filed for this patent for the use of cannabinoids for medicinal purposes. Also in 1999, they filed for a second patent, specifically for cannabis oil for the treatment of disease. That's right. Our government, through the taxpayer-funded Department of Health and Human Services, holds 2 patents on cannabinoids and cannabis oil to treat certain diseases like Alzheimer's and autoimmune diseases like Crohn's disease. Meanwhile, our government, through taxpayer-funded agencies like the Department of Justice, pursue, arrest, and imprison Americans who would attempt to access or use cannabis oil to heal their own bodies. Because in public, they claim cannabis oil is not medicine, and in private, they seek to own the rights to that medicine. Truth means that humanity is greater than politics.
So that was from Ben Swan, truththemedia.com, and that was also embedded in the article that was titled Marijuana Policy Project, Whole Foods Donate to Rand Paul's 2016 Presidential Bid. Okay. Going to move on to some other things here. This one came out of rare.us. The state of Georgia says educating citizens about its laws for free is terrorism. The state of Georgia is pursuing a lawsuit against one Carl Malamud, whom it accuses of perpetrating piracy and a form of terrorism. Malamud's heinous crime, operating public.resource.org, a popular nonprofit reference website which he shares a broad array of content from states and the federal government to make it easily available to members of the public. His specific offense is publishing the official law code of Georgia, including annotations to make it more intelligible to the public. Incredibly, this is not currently available online in a searchable database. Only an unofficial, annotated version can be viewed through LexisNexis, despite the fact that the annotations play a significant role in determining how the laws are commonly understood. The good news is that Malamud is an old hand at forcing government agencies to share information with the public. This isn't the first such battle Malamud has waged. For roughly 2 decades, he's been working to make public laws, codes, and court documents well public. At almost every turn, he's been fought by government agencies that prefer to extract a fee from taxpayers to access, even though, as Malamud points out, the public pays for the work in the first place via taxes. While in other instances Malamud might run into copyright trouble, it seems absurd that the law, created and annotated on the public's dime, should not be freely available in full for public perusal. And even if there is room for reasonable people to disagree about Malamud's exact methods, one thing seems clear: educating the public about the law, which governs their lives with increasing detail, is most definitely not terrorism. And they tell you, well, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Well, if you can't even know what the law is, yeah, it really is. If you don't know you can't even find the law, you can't look it up. They go, well, if you want to know what the law is, you got to pay for that. Well, then you are basically putting that roadblock up. Of course, we know they make laws for everything, so most laws are arbitrary and really draconian. So it's just another example of government making criminals out of people. That's what feeds the beast. As long as everyone is a criminal, then everyone is blackmailable. Okay, I got one here from Off the Grid News, this one out of Canada. Canada bans off-grid living, and it's happening in the U.S. too. It is illegal for Cheryl Smith to live in her home because it doesn't have electricity. Officials in Clark's Harbor, Nova Scotia, are refusing to give Smith a certificate of occupancy to live in her new house because it has no power. She since has stopped working on the home. Why am I going to be forced to rely on electricity or fossil fuels or whatever if I don't want to? Smith asked CTV. Smith cannot get a certificate of occupancy because national building codes in Canada require new homes to have wiring for smoke detectors and ventilation systems. The rules are the rules. Smith's 14 by 20 square foot dream tiny home has been sitting empty with signs that say freedom of rights denied and work stop tacked to the door for a year. She said it's odd that the Canadian government espouses environmentalism views but doesn't allow citizens to live off the grid. I just don't want to leave a big footprint on the earth, she told CTV. If what we are trying to do is move the world into a greener place and make it more environmentally friendly so there's something still left for our children, then why am I being forced to rely on electricity or fossil fuels? Well, I'm going to stop right there in the article, but let's look at this, at what it is. This is more, if you look at the environmental movement, a lot of people buy into it. Now, believe me, I hate pollution. You know, I hate seeing trash floating around in creeks or rivers or lakes. You know, you don't like to see, you know, the place trashed. But what goes around in the environmental movement is steered. You're used as a pawn to get you going. Yeah, I want to go green. I want to go green. You go along with all their carbon taxes, or you go along with, you know, we should downsize your living space. And what happens is, when something like this happens, you find out, oh, it's not really about living off the grid. It's about having less space. Because if you look at things like Agenda 21, they want to push people into the cities. You already have out west, I believe in California or Washington, somewhere out west, they're wanting to basically build a city of micro apartments. This is Agenda 21. You're buying into the green movement, but you don't understand that it's really a made movement where they'll take some legitimate problems and masquerade around on those problems, but push for things that will not solve that. You get played. And what ends up happening is you need to leave a smaller footprint. They don't. You will be pushed into cities and micro apartments. They won't. Living out in the country, unless you're a farmer, and more than likely you'll not own the property, they will. So basically, you're kind of a paid hand. You work the land, you get a small house on part of the property, but you own none of it. Other than that, you know, helpers, whatever, but other than that, they would like to see of all of us pushing the city. That way they can enjoy as elites flying around on their private jets. We see it over and over. If you want to push for a large micro apartment complex to be built in the city, guess what? You'll probably get it. But if you try to go out in nature and live green and off the grid, something that's actually, you know, environmentally friendly, you're kind of more living with nature, that's bad. They want you in the city in a micro apartment connected to the grid where they can monitor everything you do. You know, if you look at eugenicists and where they go with a lot of stuff, it's about creating two different species. They believe that they can create two different species, and they're, you know what, they're working on it, because there's a lot of people out there that are just completely oblivious to what's going on. And they really do believe that they can create two different species, a smart, intelligent, and more physically evolutionized species, and then they want that more short, stocky, labor, kind of do what you're told, don't think for yourself. And I see it. I see so many people that they cannot critically think anything unless they're showed how to do it, and then that's all they do. They don't have to maybe, you know, be creative. They don't have to think about something and create and problem solve. If they don't have to do any of that, they're okay. That's what the eugenicists want. That's what they believe in. I'm going to play the short clip here from CTV covering this article here. If it loads. Here we go.
A woman who wants to live off the grid has found it's not so easy to cut the power cord. She says building codes won't let her live green, but officials say there's nothing they can do because these rules are standard right across the country. CTV's Suzette Belliveau with more tonight from Clarks Harbor, Nova Scotia.
Cheryl Smith was planning to move into her new home a year ago, but without an occupancy permit, the Shelburne County woman has been held back.
I just don't want to leave a big footprint on the earth. I want to try to be as environmentally friendly as possible.
Smith wants to live off the grid in this 14 by 20 foot home. This move to mini or tiny homes is a new trend that's growing in the United States and taking off here in Canada too. But to go green, Smith has run into some roadblocks. She doesn't want electricity in her home. According to code, it's essential for smoke detectors and a proper air exchange system.
If what we're trying to do is move the world into a greener place and make it more environmentally friendly so there's something still left for our children, then why am I being forced to rely on electricity or fossil fuels or whatever if I don't want to?
Smith's father, Don, has been helping her. He tried to wire her home, but she told him to stop, saying she won't give in to the regulations. Don Smith says his daughter deserves the freedom to choose her own way of life and style of home.
She wants to live, the way her grandparents did back then. And it's a decision, a lot of people may not agree with it, but I mean, it's not a decision that's going to hurt someone else.
Town officials say they understand what Smith would like to do, but building codes must follow the same standards from coast to coast. The building inspector says they're in place for a reason, to ensure the safety of the homeowner.
The rules are the rules. Unfortunately, but I know what she's trying to do, and I applaud her for her efforts because she wants to live off the grid, live back to nature, if you will.
Clarks Harbor Mayor Lee Stoddard says he wouldn't be surprised if the standards change someday to adapt to this new style. The Smith family would like to see it happen sooner than later.
Somebody has to stand up and say, enough. That's enough. It's my right. It's my house. You didn't contribute to it financially. You don't get to tell me what to do.
But until something changes, these signs will stay in place on the front of the house. Suzette Belliveau, CTV News, Clarks Harbor, Nova.
Okay, and they'll continue to do this until finally people stand up and basically force it where they can't do anything about it. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. We've seen it happen in pockets, but will it happen nationally? Will it happen in Canada? It's still up in the air because there's still a lot of people that believe that you should be monitored. There's people that buy into it. Now, I kind of want to get in to a little bit of controversy here. And this kind of dates back because this involves some people that we've been talking about definitely after Ron Paul ran for president in 2012. And we kind of pointed these individuals out as people that, even though they might spout good philosophy, we find them shady. And I want to get into this here. Give me a second. Okay. This from Huffington Post. Head of Rand Paul Super PAC indicted. 3 staffers for former Representative Ron Paul allegedly helped pay off a state senator in exchange for his endorsement. Okay. Washington, 3 former staffers for the 2012 presidential campaign of then Representative Ron Paul, Republican of Texas, including one who currently heads the super PAC of Senator Rand Paul, Ron Paul's son, were indicted on Wednesday. The 3 allegedly engaged in a conspiracy to conceal payments made to Iowa state senator in exchange for his support of the elder Paul's campaign, according to prosecutors. The 3 former staffers, Jesse Benton, yeah, you remember that name, John Tate, remember that one, and Demetrius Kasari, which not too many people might know who that is, have been charged with conspiracy causing false records to obstruct a contemplated investigation, causing the submission of false campaign expenditure reports to the Federal Election Commission, and engaging in a scheme to make false statements to the FEC, according to the Justice Department. Benton is also charged with making a false statement to the FBI, while Kasari is charged with obstruction of justice. The staffers allegedly negotiated with Iowa State Senator Kent Sorensen, Republican, who had been supporting the presidential campaign of then Representative Michelle Bachmann, to switch over and back Ron Paul's campaign. Instead, the payments totaled $70,000 and were allegedly made in monthly installments of about $8,000 each. Federal prosecutors alleged that the payments were hidden as audio-visual expenditures. I am not splitting hairs. Sorensen was not getting paid off, Benton allegedly told the FBI in July 2014. Federal prosecutors say that was a lie. Benton, now the head of Rand Paul's super PAC, was also at one point the campaign manager of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. A spokeswoman for Rand Paul's super PAC did not immediately respond to a request for comment. And they have the indictment below on Huffington Post. So you can check it out there. These are also the same people that actively work to shun and try to sweep under the rug many of the original big Ron Paul supporters and activators of, people. There were a lot of people from the 2008 campaign that went out there and raised money grassroots style to pay for things grassroots style, not even creating an organization, but, being able to, put billboards up and, things like that. I mean, it was crazy what people were doing. And, it was just people coming together, go, I got this much, let's get all the material, let's make these big old signs and put them up. Blimps went up. So you've seen a lot of this. Well, a lot of this was done by really good-hearted but libertarian people. Well, Jesse Benton and others seemed kind of shady and started during the 2012 early on, just started kind of, making sure these people didn't have access to events, making sure a lot of these people didn't have the ability to get press access, and the extent of it kind of went to extreme, and a lot of us called it out that we really didn't think this was coming from Ron Paul. We think this was his campaign, and we think his campaign is running him kind of into the ground. And really alienated a large portion of libertarians. And then, look at the corruption that had to happen to, really secure that Ron Paul would not get the nomination. They pushed hard to make sure. They even made a nice video for him there at the end. But they had to play some dirty tricks. Well, look at all the people that were alienated and just kind of disgusted with the whole process. Knowing that there's corruption, knowing you need the support of a lot of people. A large group was alienated. And that could well be why Ron Paul was able to have so much corruption pushed to ensure that he would not get the nomination. Again, that was Huffington Post. You can check it out. Okay, where are we? Okay. Give me a second here. Got one from We Are Changed. The majority of cars can still be hacked now. Now, if you don't remember, there was a story that came out about them hacking Jeep, and I personally watched a demonstration. I think it was Land Rover. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was Land Rover. Where the guy gets out of the, Land Rover SUV, and with his iPhone drives it over the train to ensure that he gets it around with his phone. Well, it was shown that they could be hacked. And so, we got to fix this problem. We're going to fix this problem. Well, apparently the majority of the cars can still be hacked now. Short clip here from We Are Change.
Computer, and then I got to do press registration, and then I have to go to 10 o'clock all the way somewhere. Just that security B-side to try to get press credentials. It was jam-packed insanely. But now we're on the road to get an insane interview that you will see here. Actually here with the Lantry family. Seriously, one of the bravest, most courageous, amazing family human beings that I ever met in my life. Thank you so much for all the time. The 1 hour drive that me and Tim just did was without a doubt worth it. The story, being able to talk to this family was heartbreaking. Just trust me, when I do finally edit this video and put it together, it will be earth-shattering. It's insane. The video is going to be on the YouTube channel. Of course, I'm going to let you know when that happens. And now we're back on the road to a conference for more meetings and interviews. I love this song. This is the fakest cell phone tower that I've ever seen in my life. They could at least try it. There's no trees in the desert. What are they doing?
3, 4. I did play a thumb. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
More work. Oh, we are at the Security B-Side conference that's happening right now, and you probably won't be seeing many Snapchats because there's a lot of strict rules with journalists here for very obvious reasons. Just found the Hack Miami crew. What are you guys going to be doing here?
Fucking shit up.
Checking out Defcon and Black Hat.
Okay, so we can't film anyone's face here without permission. We're doing an interview back there because a lot of people here are working on codes and hacks that if you put two to two together, their lives would be in danger. So we're going to obey these rules and not film anyone's face without their permission. And the stuff that we're learning about is fucking scary. And the main basis is that anything and everything is hackable at any time. Everything. Everyone's paranoid here, and they keep checking to make sure that their Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is never on. Because if it is, you're screwed here. Things we're learning here is how inconsiderate and incompetent a lot of these large corporations are who are putting Bluetooth and Wi-Fi devices on virtually everything now. Apple, for example, has Siri, and they ran a commercial at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, "Hey Siri, call mom," leading everyone's iPhones to call their mother at 2 o'clock in the morning. Even with Siri or OK Google, that phone listens to you 24/7 and analyzes the details and sends it to a third party because they're always looking for you to say those key activation words, which means they're listening to everything, not just in that plain view way, but in many other ways too.
This could be the progressive dongle you plug into your OBD2 port. So even an unhackable car with no remote interface now has a remote attack surface because of the progressive dongle.
Okay, what I just learned about car hacking is fucking scary. A lot of cars are hackable right now, and the manufacturers aren't doing anything about it, except for, I believe, BMW and Tesla that do secure updates to make sure your car is not hackable. Tesla also just right now took a pledge not to sue hackers for finding exploits, and will actually reward them if they do find bugs in their software. They're the first company to do this. EFF table, we have Sue the Fed, someone who will charge you $1,000, $5,000, or $30,000 to get your records from the federal government. And also, really all stuff you could do for yourself if you're not lazy. Just left that conference. Now we're going to another conference.
Party. We're gonna party. Party.
Conference. Told you. It was a conference. I don't know if this is a conference, but I never saw this with hackers before. Right, so recently, a group of hackers publicly hacked the Fiat Chrysler and the Jeep Cherokee car. Those cars have been recalled, but what you're not being told is many other cars with a computer in it also have an exploit that could be very easily hacked, but since there's no media, those cars have not been recalled yet. Which means that many cars with a computer in it, including police cars, could be very easily hacked now, and the only reason they're not being recalled is because there's no media attention. This information should be known by everybody, but it's not. And the conference hasn't even started yet. Black Hat starts tomorrow. I am exhausted. It was seriously a very extreme day, to say the least. Subscribe. We're going to have a lot more videos coming your way. And most importantly, thank you so much for supporting Rick.
Okay. Now, there's a lot of things that can be done to a car to disable it, but with a lot of these newer cars, Wi-Fi connection, Bluetooth, and with sensors everywhere, definitely when you're in the city, this kind of plays into that whole control grid again. Get you in the city, everything you have is monitored, your washer and dryer, your refrigerator, your microwave, your toaster, your thermostat, your car, your lawnmower, everything. You'll be limited. You'll get penalized if you do too much. What do you think the world elite's going to be doing? Do you think they're going to be living that lifestyle? Do you think, you're going to have Obama or any of these people living that lifestyle? You think Hillary's going to live? Do you think Donald Trump's going to live that lifestyle? Do you think any of these people are going to live that lifestyle? Do you think the Queen of England's going to live that lifestyle? No, you'll probably be in a micro apartment, but they're still going to have their mansions and their castles, and it's that seeking for a world government, a world unity for their betterment, basically. It's for their betterment, not for yours. And that's what they're pushing all over Europe. That's what they push everywhere. That, we should unite as a world. Well, yeah, in a voluntary way. But not be controlled as one world. A giant empire that encompasses the whole world, oh yeah, that's really going to work out for the betterment of, poor people, middle class people, people in poverty, people starving. Yeah, that's really going to work out for them. I have one here. This one from Wall Street Journal. Climate change. Rarely do American presidents display the raw willfulness that President Obama did Monday in rolling out his plan to reorganize the economy in the same name or in the name of climate change without a vote in Congress or even much public debate. Mr. Obama is using his last 18 months to dictate U.S. energy choices for the next 20 or 30 years. This abuse of power is regulation without representation. The so-called Clean Power Plan commands states to cut carbon emissions by 32% from 2005 levels by 2030. This final mandate is 9% steeper than the draft the Environmental Protection Agency issued in June of 2014. The damage to growth, consumer incomes, and U.S. competitiveness will be immense, assuming the rule isn't tossed by the courts or rescinded by the next administration. States have regulated their power systems since the early days of electrification, but the EPA is now usurping this role to nationalize power generation and consumption. To meet the EPA's targets, states must pass new laws or regulations to shift their energy mix from fossil fuels, subsidize alternative energy, improve efficiency, impose a cap-and-trade program, or all of the above. Coal-fired power will be the first to be shot, but the EPA is targeting all sources of carbon energy, as coal plants have retired amid 7 years of EPA assault. Natural gas recently eclipsed coal as a dominant source of electric power. This cleaner burning gas surge has led to the cheapest and fastest emissions plunge in history, but the EPA isn't satisfied. Thus, the new rule of central planning favors green energy sources like wind and solar. The plan expands their quotas and funding while punishing states that are insufficiently enthusiastic. The EPA estimates renewables will make up 28% of U.S. electric capacity by 2030, up from less than 5% today. The rule is the first step in a crescendo of climate change politics that Mr. Obama is planning for his final days. In September, he will commune with Pope Francis on the subject and then jet to Paris in hopes that his new rule shows enough U.S. progress that the Climate Treaty Conference in December will reach some grand accord. As for the home front, the point is to bull rush states into making permanent changes to their energy systems. The investments and lead times in new power plants and transmission lines on this scale are generational, yet state compliance plans are due in September 2016, and most of the carbon reductions must be complete by 2022. The White House and EPA know they are distorting the law beyond recognition, and that rule will be litigated for years, but they figured that if they can intimidate the states into enacting as much change as fast as possible, a legal defeat won't matter because the outcome will be a fate accomplished. The Supreme Court did give EPA the authority to regulate carbon emissions in Massachusetts versus EPA in 2007, but that was not a roving license to do anything the EPA wants. The High Court has rebuffed the agency twice in the last 2 years for exceeding its statutory powers. When an agency claims to discover in a long extant statute an unheralded power to regulate a significant portion of the American economy, we typically greet its announcement with a measure of skepticism. The court warned last year, we expect Congress to speak clearly if it wishes to assign an agency decisions of vast economic and political significance. Congress did no such thing with the Clean Power Plan, which is a new world balanced on a fragment of the Clear Air Act called Section 11D or 111D. This passage runs a couple hundred words and was added to the law in 1977, well before the global warming stampede. Historically, Section 111D was applied inside the fence line, meaning the EPA can set performance standards for individual plants, not for everything connected to those sources that either produce or use electricity. When the EPA rule does arrive before the justice, maybe they'll rethink their doctrine of Chevron deference, which the judiciary hands the bureaucracy broad leeway to interpret ambiguous laws. An agency using a 38-year-old provision as pretext for the cap and tax plan that a Democratic Congress rejected in 2010 and couldn't get 50 state votes now is the all-time nadir of administrative interpretation. Meantime, states can help the resistance by refusing to participate. And you can read the rest of it there at the Wall Street Journal. Climate change. Okay. Sorry, I have an issue here. Nothing wants to leave. Okay. I have one here. This one out of Infowars.com. Maybe. I don't know if it's going to go now. Okay, there we go. This is about the Michelle Obama school lunches. Now, if anybody's seen the school lunches, I thought what we got was bad. Some of these school lunches to meet her plan thing is sickening. But clinical dietitian Daniel Jarvis has slammed the Michelle Obama-backed federal lunch program, labeling it a money-making scam that will cause higher rates of cancer in children who are being forced to eat carcinogenic processed meat. Jarvis has shown a study obtained by CBS 13, which shows that the food being served in schools is incredibly unhealthy despite being labeled nutritious. The government buys food in bulk from large corporations, which, according to the study, are profiteering by hundreds of millions of dollars, dominating school trade magazines, ads, and pushing nuggets, corn dogs, and pizza as supposedly nutritious meals. Jarvis, who works at Cabell Huntington Hospital in West Virginia, was shocked when he saw the study. I see pepperoni and processed meats that cause cancer like a scheme to make money, he stated. Parents and teachers in other school districts also told CBS 13 that processed foods were dominating menus. And I should have enough time for this little clip from the CBS.
Corporation food fraud. 13 News reporter Randy Yo is working for you and your child to see what goes on your kids' plates.
And we have with some green beans and refried beans.
And we bring them out and we put them on the pizza pans.
It's whole grain?
Whole grain.
In the cafeteria kitchen, in the giant food warehouse and freezer. Cabell County Schools food service folks say they've stayed ahead of the game when it comes to federal nutrition requirements. They're talking maximum fruits, veggies, and fresh whole grain made from scratch. Minimum processed foods.
But once the children start eating the whole grains, then they don't realize that they're missing the white stuff.
Students can still get things like pizza and chicken nuggets and those things if they have a whole grain breading.
At Central City Elementary's Energy Express summer lunch program, we took a pint-sized poll. Tell me, what do you like in your favorite school lunch?
Maybe a ham sandwich. Chocolate muffin. Like there's spaghetti, tacos, apples, mandarin oranges, and broccoli.
A wide-ranging mix. Most school food is purchased through state and federal governments, who in turn buy in bulk from big corporations.
I mean, it really is when you stop and think about it.
We showed McCoy and Hutchison a national doctor's study claiming that major corporate food producers required to meet those same nutritional guidelines are profiteering by hundreds of millions of dollars, dominating school trade magazine ads, pushing nuggets, corn dogs, and pizza as supposedly nutritious meal mates.
We think that we serve students very healthy school meals, and we hate to see that those kind of ads that kind of indicate that we're not.
They know kids like pizza and nuggets and corn dogs, so trying to say it's healthy to make money.
We showed the same study to a Cabell Huntington Hospital clinical dietitian who says he saw outright food fraud.
I see pepperoni and processed meats aren't very good for cancer if you eat a whole lot of it. It's kind of like a scheme to make money.
Now, the Cabell County school system serves as a healthy meal mentor, if you will, for several other area school districts that, for one reason or another, continue to serve highly processed, cheap, easy, much less healthy food. Parents and teachers working here with children in other school districts say processed food still dominates those student menus.
Almost every day, we have one line specifically for pizza. Children can get pizza every single day on that line.
Corn dogs and nuggets too?
Yes, at least twice, if not 3 times a month.
You just have to work harder to find better solutions for healthier food when you have a limited budget, but it's possible to eat healthy on a limited budget.
My favorite four things in a school lunch would be bread, cheese, pizza, and probably orange juice.
But nutritious and healthy? That depends on what's in the warehouse and kitchen to start with. For 13 News, I'm Randy Yohe, working for you in Huntington.
Okay. Now, when we look at what we feed our kids in the public school systems here compared to over in Europe and almost any other country in Europe, first world, second world country, it's amazing. It's always processed everything. Your pink slime nuggets, your half beef, half soy burger, or your processed lunch meat, which is not, there's a lot of people that look for the organic, the no preservatives, no hormones, no, non-GMO fed livestock. And they actually have that out there now because the market's called for it so much. No, they get the cheapest lunch meat possible. That stuff that basically you can buy in like extremely large packages for, the price that you can buy like 4 slices of a good organic brand for. We've seen, even from when I went there, at least they had a lot of fresh stuff. Yeah, they had pizza. And the only time you got pizza is when everything that they had just came out of a can and tasted like crap. But, once we reached a certain grade level, we were able to leave for lunch, and we didn't eat there. But I think a lot of people don't eat really too healthy at home either. But for those that are aware, we've seen people send their kids to school with the healthy lunches. You get told that lunch wasn't packed correctly and wasn't a healthy enough lunch. Therefore, we couldn't accept that, and we had to give them a school lunch. Wait a minute. We know the school lunches are not healthy. It really has become just a big scam. And to dictate to a parent what they're allowed to feed their kid, how they're allowed to manage their diet. There's a lot of parents out there that really do care enough to make sure their kids are getting more healthier choices. You can't always, maybe, but the attempt to give them the healthiest choice you could possibly give compared to process this, process that, can this, can that, preservatives, sodium. A lot of what they feed the kids is worse than, something you could throw together for dirt cheap at home. And really, what's happening is a lot of money's going in people's pockets and not into the lunch program. And this, is exactly the model that government provides. We will be the middleman in between free exchange of services and goods and we're going to pocket a whole bunch of money and regulate it. We're going to use that money to pay for the enforcement to regulate your exchange. So it's really hard to actually make effective change in your school unless you're private school or you homeschool. But the public school system, don't expect too much change in that. And, you know, I think the public school system is getting so out of hand that we're going to start seeing some issues. And one of the issues that I recently seen something about, I don't know if I can find it in time. Basically, it was talking about having kids. It came down to basically putting kids through mental health screenings before they start school. Basically, treating all children as potential mental health problem, meaning which I personally do not believe in, you know, the psychology stuff that they have out right now because, you know, they say it's a disorder for a kid to not go along with authority. Oppositional defiant disorder. No, that's being a child. And that's the child usually questioning authority, trying to get a legitimate answer because we live in a world that is so arbitrary that kids that have a simple understanding don't understand the arbitrary parts of laws in society. Because we are, in a way, asked backward from common sense and freedom. We're coming up to the end of the broadcast. I want to remind everybody, check out the UCY store. Go to ucy.tv and click the UCY store tab. They have partnered with Amazon, and you can find great prepping, camping, and radiation protection gear. And at the same time, it helps UCY cover operating costs. And also go to antityrannynews.com/metal and check out Amagi Metals, one of my personal choices for buying metals. Great price, great customer service, and great delivery time. Check them out, antityrannynews.com/metal. And we get a kickback, help cover operating costs on our end. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in and stay tuned here on UCY.TV for all the great broadcasts that are coming up next. And I will catch you this Friday, and I'm hoping to start getting some interviews coming soon. And I've been really out of it. I've had a lot on my plate, and hopefully here I will be getting back into the groove of things. I want to thank everybody for always hanging in there. And again, check out UCY Store and help cover this network. And this network